Before we start, let's take a few moments to do some deep breathing. Deep breathing has many great benefits for your health and well-being, like reducing stress and anxiety. It isn't a complicated exercise to do. It doesn't require any equipment or a dedicated space. As you saw, visual breathing guides are widely available. To access one is as simple as a Google search. Most people can do it any day and anytime. Yet, how often do you actually take the time to do it? For most people, it's rarely, or at least it's not consistent enough. My name is Sadprasid, and on behalf of my co-authors, I'm very excited to share with you how idle games can help people become more motivated to do deep breathing and stick with it routinely. Deep breathing is a mindfulness exercise that helps restore our physiological balance. It takes much less time than other mindfulness activities like meditation and yoga, which are normally practiced in longer sessions, 30 minutes or more. For deep breathing to be effective, it's typically practiced in short but frequent sessions. For example, when someone feels a little anxious, they can take a short pause, 15 to 30 seconds, to take a deep breath to slow down the nervous system. Then repeat the exercise again in a couple of hours. This sporadic timing can make it difficult for people to incorporate this exercise into their daily lives and to stay consistent with it. Deep breathing is also so mundane and seemingly unimportant that we don't proactively plan for it. So much so that people often have a hard time staying motivated and remembering to do it. Because of this struggle, there are many commercially available tools which are built to try to help people remember and carve out time to do deep breathing. But these tools are not always the most effective, especially when it comes to the motivational aspect. In an attempt to help people to do boring things that are good for them, like deep breathing, researchers have looked at using serious games. Because games have potential to influence attitudes, beliefs, behaviors in ways that are distinct from other mediums, many of these games also target therapeutic exercises, including breathing-related ones. Many existing therapy games are modeled after traditional skill-based games, which reward players for skill improvement. These games are often played in longer and less frequent sessions. Although this model aligns very well with how many therapies are practiced, it doesn't align very well with the intermittent and frequent practice nature of deep breathing. But we noticed that there is one existing game genre called idle games, which has a play cycle similar to how deep breathing are practiced, shorter and frequent sessions, in which players have many intermittent moments of play many times throughout the day. Idle games have a significant portion of gameplay happening in the background, meaning that the game progresses even when the player is not actively playing, as well as when they are actively engaging with the game. The core mechanics are often simple and repetitive, like clicking or tapping. Idle games use two mechanisms which foster this unique play cycle: pushing and pulling. The pushing mechanism pushes the player away from the game after a period of continuous active gameplay. It is accomplished by having the core mechanic of the game cost a limited resource. Once this particular resource runs out, the player can no longer perform the core action. This resource will only regenerate when the player is not actively playing the game, ultimately forcing the player to take a break, which sets maximum length of continuous active gameplay session. Since pushing players away from the game risks disengagement and then possibly forgotten returns, idle games often use polling mechanism to draw the player back into the game after a period of withdrawal. An example polling mechanism is halting of passive progression. Many idle games make the points a player can earn while they're away to stop when they have not engaged with the game for a longer period of time. To continue this passive point progressions, players have to return to engage with the game, even just for a brief moment. When these two mechanics, pushing and pulling, are at play, idle game players tend to engage with the game in intermittent play sessions, which interleaves with their other daily activities. Given the parallel between the idle gameplay cycle and the intermittent nature of deep breathing practice, in this work, we hope to find out if idle games can be used to help motivate and foster effective practice cycles for exercises like deep breathing. To evaluate our research questions, we built a proof of concept idle breathing game called BreathPurr-suade. The theme of our game was inspired by many well-known idle games like Nico Asume, which revolves around caring for animals. In our game, the player manages a cat cafe with the goal of rescuing as many cats as possible. To limit the length of a breathing session, in our game, every time that the player breathes, it uses up a limited resource. In our case, it's cat food. Once this cat food runs out, the player can no longer use the breathing guide and is effectively pushed out of the game. This means that the player can only activate the breathing guide continuously for a maximum of 5 minutes. While they are pushed out of the game, they can continue with other activities while the game continues to make passive progress. To pull the player back into the game after a period of withdrawal, the cat stops producing points passively after 3 hours of no engagement. In order to continue progressing, the player has to return to the game to perform a session of deep breathing, even if just a short one. We conducted 2 studies comparing our game with a standalone breathing guide without any game mechanics. The first is a formative validation to confirm that introducing game elements does not interfere with physiological benefits of breathing guide. This study was done in a control lab where we monitor participants' breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. Participants performed deep breathing with both the game-based and the non-game-based breathing guides. The result of the study confirmed that despite introducing game animations and other distractions, both our game and the standalone breathing guide yield comparable physiological benefits. More details you can find in the paper. The second study was a 4-week deployment where participants were given one of the applications to use for 2 weeks as part of their daily lives. After 2 weeks, they were given the other version of the application. This is done in a counterbalanced manner. In this study, we looked at participants' usage data as well as objective measures through semi-structured weekly interviews. In this second study, we found that while using our game, participants practiced deep breathing more frequently. The intervals between sessions were shorter, meaning that they returned to the game much faster than the non-game one, and the adherence rate, as a result, was also higher while participants were using our game. You can find the details about this result in the paper as well. Overall, here are the lessons learned from our studies. 1. We learned that idle games can be a healthy way to encourage healthy but boring behaviors. Our work suggests idle games may persuade players in a way that overcome mental barriers to do mundane things by shifting the focus from the actual activity to the game's gradual progress and incremental rewards. But because idle game shifts the focus away from the actual activity, this may mean that it will not work for everything. For some therapy that required strong focus on the correctness of the technique, it is possible game mechanics will create distractions that could interfere with the benefits. In our work, we learned that carefully choosing the right target behavior and ensuring the benefits can still materialize in the context of a game activity, like through an in-lab study, can be integral. We also learned that while pushing and pulling mechanics inherent to idle games, they have the potential to be extended beyond non-gamings or other activities, while appropriate engagement patterns could be beneficial. For example, studying or other exercises. Our work showed that these tools provide designers with the flexibility to tailor engagement patterns to any specific context. Lastly, we learned the importance of relevant rewards. For this approach to be effective, the lure has to be something that the player wants. This signals the significance of understanding the desire of the target audience, as well as the sustainability of the approach. Players need to perceive ongoing value in the rewards to maintain their motivation and engagement. This can pose a challenge for designers, as player preferences can evolve over time. In this project, we have demonstrated how idle game design can be an effective approach for motivating people in otherwise hard-to-support therapeutic exercises that required frequent and intermittent practices. Thanks for your interest in our work.